Okay. Well, all right. We're back. Despair. I'm going to start with a couple of short poems to just sort of get us in the vein for this. One is just the first, actually, first three lines of a thousand-line poem by Dante Alighieri, the medieval genius from Florence, and when he wrote the Commedia, it was so great that Petrarch called it the Divine Commedia, the Divine Comedy, but he just called it the Comedy. And interesting because help us working with despair, because the classical idea of comedy is it's technically a comedy if it ends well, no matter what the hell you go through in the beginning. That if it ends well, it's called a comedy. And so he goes through hell and climbing the seven-story mountains, walking through a wall of fire and whatever, but it ended well. So it's called the commedia, the comedy. Here's the first three lines of it. And it goes like this: midway in life's journey, I found myself completely lost. I found myself in a dark wood. The true way completely lost. Midway in life's journey, I found myself in a dark wood. The true way completely lost. Midway in life's journey. It's the epic of midlife crises, the commedia, and these lines: nel mezzo del cammin de nostra vita, midway in life's journey, nel mezzo, in the middle, nel mezzo. And it's the kind of thing that does, we can sort of on ego power make it through, the early part of life, and everything seems to be going according to plan. And then nel mezzo del cammin de nostra vita, in the middle of life's journey, I found myself in a dark wood. Un selva oscura in Italian. I found myself in a dark wood, lost. The true way completely lost. Yeah, it's just so human. And that is, those three lines would be a good description of despair, as we will see, because the despair is it's a compound, complex kind of dark emotion, as opposed to grief, and as we'll find out, fear, which are much more elemental, much simpler, no less devastating, but they're like elements, like hydrogen and oxygen, or silver or gold. They're elements. They're elementary. They're kind of and visceral too. Where and this is something that Greenspan brings in. Whereas despair is much more complex, and it's more like a compound, like water, H2O. It's a compound of two different elements. And as we'll see, to really start to understand despair, we'll see it's a complex compound of at least six elements. Okay, so in the middle, nel mezzo, in the middle of life's journey, midlife is often where we encounter this. I found myself in a dark wood, and the dark wood suggests you just don't know what's going on. All of a sudden, it's dark. The darkness means don't know what you're doing, and then the true way completely lost. If you remember the great Stafford poem, he says, "There's a thread you follow. You lose the thread of life." And that's all part of despair. And the true way completely lost. The true way is your way. It's the way you're meant to walk, to live your life, nobody else's life. There's another great Bill Stafford line. He said when the river is frozen, tell me mistakes I have made. Tell me if what I've done is my life. one of the great mistakes, and it can happen in midlife. Might be happening just right in the homes we were brought into. Uh, our parents had plans for us. I mean, my father was here, I was like 50, and my father was in his last days, and he kept saying, well, have you ever thought about going back to law school? I came home one day and just sort of put my book bag down. It was a rough day. And he said, well, have you ever thought about going back to law school? And I said, I never was in law school. That was your dream. He wanted to be a lawyer, and Italians in the 30s. He wanted to be a lawyer and then get into the FBI. Well, he didn't do either of them. And I said, there's your dream. It's not mine. And I said, well, what is your dream? And I said, well, I'm doing it. I'm teaching. He said, yeah, but you're not making any money. Yeah, it was a long, rambling thing. But, people do live the life their parents want them to live. And great if it's your life. But around midlife, it just wears out. You find yourself in a dark wood, the true way, which is your way, which the way you're meant to live, completely lost. So that's a great one. That's right. It sort of is the territory. Yeah. And then there's, just need to fix the screen a bit. Do a few technicals here. Yeah. And here's the Rilke poem. Dante knew darkness because, he was on the wrong side in the political Florence, and his side lost. And so they banished him. He never came back to Florence. There's a real kind of pissed off looking Dante statue, a bronze statue outside of Santa Croce in Florence. And he never could come back. So he was in utter despair about that. And in that despair, he wrote the Commedia. Another dark a critter who has actually learned how to go into this dark space, this dark wood, was Rainer Maria Rilke. And he was a kind of a dark guy who lived in Bohemia. He actually went to Italy one time, and it was too sunny for him. So he wrote a real dark poem about it. But here's a poem that'll help us out today. And I think I've read it before to the group, but it comes from a book that you ought to have, actually. It's called Rilke's Book of Hours, Love Poems to God. And it is great. It is great. So you can see that. And it's translated by a couple of really great translators. This is called, he didn't have any titles for his poems, so the title's usually the first line. I live my life in widening circles that reach out across the world. I may not complete this last one, but I give myself to it. I circle around God, around the primordial tower, and I've been circling for thousands of years, and I still don't know. Am I a falcon, a storm, or a great song? I live my life in widening circles. So we're going to work with this image of the circle today to try to help us learn to navigate despair. I live my life in widening circles that reach out across the world. I may not complete this last one, but I give myself to it. I circle around God, around the primordial tower. And I've been circling for thousands of years, and I still don't know. Am I a falcon, a storm, or a great song? Yeah, well, we'll come back to that. But that's idea of living your life in widening circles that reach out across the world. He says there's so much don't know in this, which is definitely what we have to sort of start dropping the stuff we do know to be able to work with any of these dark emotions, and especially despair. What you know can hurt you. And so it's important. He says, I may not complete this last one, but I give myself to it. In other words, he's living with uncertainty here. And that's key. And he says, and I've been doing this for 1,000 years and I still don't know. My Falcon, A Storm, or A Great Song. Those three choices are really interesting. We're not going to have time to go into them, but it's really worth contemplating that poem. But he still doesn't know, and that's the key. That's why I said during the interval in between the sessions, don't get any incoming information. It just sort of clogs the arteries to the the heart. And with more information, we've actually, this whole journey is about subtraction. It's about losing the stuff that's getting in the way. It's about unclogging the arteries, you see. And so that's why it's important during a retreat not to stuff the media. Yeah, circle around God, around the primordial tower. Yeah, so there's a center to, we had that diamond with the 4 points, which is classic for mandala, but there's always a center in the mandala. Call it what you will, okay? But there's some center that we're always circling around in a life, okay? And so we'll be working with that. I just want to, before we go any further, I want to just sort of the essence of what Miriam Greenspan is talking about. What she talked, this is a key kind of front-loaded view of hers. She feels that depression, what we call depression in this culture, in our culture now worldwide, is unalchemized despair. Let that image get through to you, that depression, which is rampant in this country, many people on more than one medication for it. They're in therapy for it, or they're not, and they're buying an AR-15 and going blowing people away. We living in this country where we're looking for the reasons for this kind of madness that we're living in the middle of. And she says that this depression is a kind of unalchemized despair. And in other words, an untended despair. And mostly we can't tend despair because we don't even know what it is. We don't even recognize it. It's very subtle as well as being complex. We're going to break that down. But so if you can't work with it skillfully to tend, that's what she means by tending it. And alchemizing it means, again, I'm playing Van in the breaks because he's talking about, his job is turning lead into gold. Well, our job today is trying to figure out how to learn the ways to turn despair into, faith, hope, love. It's important to learn this stuff. And she feels if it goes untended, her term is it'll coagulate in the body and become obstructive and become depression. Oh, I think that's a pretty good view. Depression is rampant, and there's a good reason for despair. It's not a mistake. Just as grief and fear are not mistakes. They come with the territory, and they're dark angels, as Rilke would call them. They're dark angels. And they're there to, it'd be very hard not to hit despair in a world like we're living in now. And I'm not going to go into it all, but we're living in a very precarious time, and it'd be very hard. And after we work with despair, and then we work with fear in the beginning of December, we're going to work with the ecology of all of this. And the ecology means relating our individual emotions and to the planet, see, to the whole deal. Okay, that's what ecology means. See how it's connected and how we're connected to everything. And our despair is a result of everything, and also our transformation is the cure for everything, or at least what we can do. Okay, so let's just look at what I consider the six sort of elements that compound into creating despair. And it's helpful to It's not exhaustive. I think it could even be more refined than this, but these seem to be key elements. Grief and fear are two of them, and these are the two other huge dark emotions for which everything spins. So grief and fear are part of despair. Um, Anger goes in there. Anger comes in there too, and a feeling of helplessness is often part of it. And then loss of direction and loss of meaning. So those really are the six elements that I can see in despair: grief, fear, anger, feeling of helplessness. Can't do anything about it. And then and it always involves, it's like Dante said, I found myself in a dark wood, completely lost the true way. So a loss of direction, but also a loss of meaning. And any of those could be like a bigger part of uh, the individual's experience of despair. Maybe it's fear is the bigger part of it, but the last two are not often seen. That there's a sense of loss of direction and a sense of loss of meaning, which also becomes grief because it's lost. Yeah. So those are the six elements. I think it's helpful to to identify them, because then you could sort of represent. You could sort of pick up on, yeah, I'm not just feeling crummy. It might be feeling a helplessness in a certain situation, or it might be loss of direction. We lost the thread of things, or meaning. Yeah. The way, and then this gets to something else. So those are the whole mix, or the complex compound nature uh, of despair. And despair is, a lot of that is cognitive. Despair is unlike the visceral nature of grief or fear. A despair has a huge cognitive component. You might say, if you're working with the body itself, that fear is hits you in the belly, grief hits you in the heart and the lung area, and despair is really what we're doing with life up here. Now, here's an example of why it's really highly cognitive. Another part is the sense of is our map of the world. The way human beings, then with our ego minds, the way we think life should go and the way life actually goes are two different directions. The way we think my life should go, the way I think my life should go, the way I think life in general should go, and the way that life actually does go are two different things. And that's the problem. Shakespeare would say, there's the nub, as Buddha would say, because that's all of Buddhism, in just that image, the fact that we think life should be X and it turns out to be Y. In other words, our view of life, our map of not only our individual life, but the whole cosmos is like this. And the real reality of the way it is like this. It's a mismatch. That's where the Buddha starts. That's why I say he's my favorite Indian neurologist, because he starts with the mind and how what we think, really colors everything we see. It's like the glasses that you put on. You put on your map of the world and you see those things. So again, what humans think, what we think the world should be like and what the world is really like are two different things, and thus the discord. And the Buddhism is about putting it together. It's about getting aligned, because as long as you're not aligned to the way things really are, you're going to suffer. And suffering's different than pain. The dark emotions are helpful. They're dark angels, and they are painful. That's another reason for the word dark. Uh, but if you're trying to live a life without pain, it's going to be pretty small, and you're not going to be able to pull it off, because essentially this mismatch between the way I think it should be and the way it is, that's the source of a lot of unnecessary pain, and a lot of which is suffering. Suffering is unnecessary pain. There's such a thing as necessary pain, as we'll see. Okay, but you don't need the unnecessary. In your view, if you're using like we use Google Maps to go around Italy, and if we were using the medieval maps of the world, that's not an accurate map, but we wouldn't have gotten to the restaurant we were looking for. We wouldn't have gotten to the hotel. But we're doing that still. We're using a map that doesn't work. Well, what is the map we're using? First of all, the ego map, it has certain things about it. First of all, it's linear. Our view of the world is linear from the ego mind. That's just the nature of the ego mind. We put everything in a straight line. That's why we build houses in this culture with a straight line. Shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. It's linear, okay? And life isn't linear. That's our first problem. And so when we try to explain life, explain literally means to put 3 dimensions into a flat plane, into 2 dimensions, and so there you can't explain the deepest things in life, but we try. See, so it's linear, and it's also, if you look at our map of life, it has a kind of ascent to it. You're supposed to be going up and up. That's why we charge the biggest price for the penthouse. That we're supposed to be going up and up, climbing to the top of the ladder in whatever we're doing. It's an ascendancy thing. Okay, so that's another thing about at least the ego map, certainly in the West. I think it might be the ego map in all cultures, but other cultures have abilities to follow a different map a little more readily than we do. We're the most powerful country in the world. We're the #1 country. Notice how happy we aren't. Notice how happy those guys who get to the top of the ladder. The Taoists, the contemplative Chinese, they say that the top of the ladder is the shakiest place. That's where you fall from, you see. But we build that whole thing. And so if the life of our kids, if they're not making more money than we made, we think something's wrong, that everything should be getting better. We should be getting more successful, more comfortable, more rich, all these things. It goes up. We even think of, we have this image of a stairway to heaven, and the ultimate place is up there. That's the map we're working with in really modernity. And it doesn't match up. Now I'm going to suggest a different map. And I'll just put this back on in case it's not there. But the diamond, that point of those 4 points, actually it's going to become a circle. And so I'm going to work you through what my own name for it is, it's the sacred roundabout map of the way life is. We're traveling all through Europe. If you travel in Europe and in Italy, you go to places, and in America we have stop signs, 4-way, 4 straight lines, whatever. In Italy, they have roundabouts, and it's a flow because you don't really ever have to stop. You might have to stop when somebody's coming, as a right of way, but it's more of a flow. So they don't need a lot of stoplights because they have the roundabout. They have the roundabout. I'll have to stop this. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. So these are the four corners of that, and if we can get it down. And then we'll elaborate on it, because this is the first part of transforming despair is to have an accurate map, have another map, you see. So the first stop I would put at the very top of diamond. The first diamond is order. We all know the feeling of when everything's in order. Okay, everything fits. Everything is just the way we want it. Okay, uh, so that's the first stop on this circular. It's an eternal. Why, like Rilke was saying, it's an eternal circle. So we have order. Now, if you go down the next thing on the right, there's disorder, and then you go to uh, the station on the bottom. And you could put emptiness there. And then the last station on the left side of it is reorder. So we've got a map that's different. And then so order, disorder, emptiness, reorder. Um, the sacred roundabout, the sacred map is saying that's the way the universe has always been and always will be. It's a cycle, and that's what Rilke's pointing to. So let's sort of unpack this a little bit. We got a little time to unpack this. Uh, Everybody knows how good order feels. Order is like synonymous for control. Life is under your control. Yeah, who doesn't like that? Okay, that's great. And then all of a sudden it's not. So that takes us to disorder. It just somehow just falls apart. You know, the moment falls apart. Our two friends, Mike and Karen Rafferty, who met us in Lugano, Switzerland, they were coming into Italy as we were going out. He's one of my Notre Dame roommates, great guy, and so they were going on for some time in Florence after we were leaving, and he texted me from Milan where he was flying out, like we flew out from, and he said, "Well, my flight got canceled, rescheduled, and canceled again. So we're spending an extra night in Milan." And he was like, he sent me the emoji like, well, disorder. His plans fell apart. And I sent him back a smiley face. I said, "Hey, you're in Milan, you know." And, but so it happens all the time that our best laid plans, as Robert Burns said, they fall apart. Okay, that's the second phase, and this falling apart can be loss of anything, loss of your plans. Pam lost her iPad in Atlanta going through the check thing, and she was really grim about it for a while. It's just what happens when we lose something. We lose, people die. We're aging. We're losing that vitality we had when we were 20 or 30. That's all part of this disorder. This falling apart. The Buddhists actually put this step at the very end of the Heart Sutra. If you go to a Zen monastery, they'll chant the Heart Sutra 3 times a day. The Heart Sutra is the absolute heart of the Buddhist teachings. The Buddha supposedly had 84,000 sutras. He taught for 40 years, unlike Jesus, who was too hot to last even probably 2 years. Buddha was this cool, under the radar kind of character. They're very complementary, Buddhism, and because if it gets too hot, a little Buddhism will cool things off, and if it's too cold, a little heat will heat it up. But Jesus, his teachings, New Testament, but the Buddhist sutras, and so they boiled it down, just like we tended to boil down Jesus's teachings into the Our Father. If you go out to Gethsemane, they'll chant the Our Father 3 times a day. It's sort of core, So here's the end of the Heart Sutra of the Buddhists. Gate, they're going along, blah, 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 and they go gate, parasam gate, bodhisvaha. Sort of disappears into emptiness. Gate, paragate, parasam gate, bodhisvaha. And my translation of that is fall apart, everything falls apart, the whole shebang falls apart. Hallelujah. Well, I couldn't understand it when I was first working with it. But, it's part of the cycle. That's why it's hallelujah, because your plan's got to fall apart. Your freeze-dried plan for your life does fall apart. It just won't work. Okay, and because disorder is that that part of, the order has to fall apart. Nobody likes that. And actually, this station on this circle is where all addiction takes place. Because there's three ways we fight this. Three ways we maladapt to this. We fight it, which I'm built to fight this kind of stuff. You know, and then you could also flee it, and we flee it by physically just taking off. Just get on your motorcycle and taking off, or whatever, or traveling around the world, or without even leaving the house. You can flee the pain of things falling apart by distracting yourself. And distracting can turn into numbing, and before you know it, a lot of people end up in despair, because they've taken this route. They just can't go through this, and so they do. God, I mean, we've got Netflix, we've got HBO, and they're not bad things, but you can go down that route or the computer and endless surfing and whatever, and you're just distracting yourself from the pain that's there. If something has fallen apart, something is lost, you see. Uh, and that can translate as numbness. The Pink Floyd in The Wall, they say, I have become comfortably numb. Yeah. And then the third thing, we can fight it, we can flee it, and then we can try to fix it. So those are the three ways we freak out at this point. And part of the numbness can be drugs, alcohol, and we talk about getting a shot of heroin as getting my fix. That's the fix for the pain. And these are the three ways these are the exit places. These are the exit places. And I sort of, with the way my temperament is as a one leading into two, I fight it and then I try to fix it, pretty much. Yeah, so we all have a little different blend, and I've done all three of those things, including fleeing it, but none of it works. You'll find that out if you really look at it. And so what does work is to go through that, to actually feel that. And if you do, you end up at the third station, which is a sense of emptiness, which is not nothing. This is what Buddhism prepares you for. This is what contemplation in every tradition prepares you for. It's like when I did the invoke, getting ourselves, make ready for the sacred. It involves dropping, emptying. It's called kenosis. And yeah, that the way is, you have to, if you can go through the suffering without doing one of those three things, without fighting it, without fleeing it, without trying to fix it, if you can just experience it, which is why we're training in meditation, so that when this stuff happens, that you can sit stably, you have a certain sense of stability, and you can go through it, you can feel it, and then there will be an emptying. So most people are most afraid of emptiness. Even Buddhists talk about it. The Dalai Lama said, I still don't understand emptiness. Well, there's really nothing to understand. It just comes from going through the falling apart and the emptiness. And can you abide in it? And can you embrace it? Okay. We're going to go on and talk a little bit about those things tomorrow, in the Sunday thing, where we'll piggyback off today. But you go through emptiness, and we just want to fill it, but there's that resting, that abiding, and then the embracing the moment, even the emptiness. There's a kind of the ability, you're learning the ability to embrace it. If you can do that, if you can go through the disorder and through the emptiness, then the fourth stage comes up. There's a reordering. Dante wrote a bunch of long poems, and he called it La Vita Nuova, the new life. You could put the new order there, the reordering. Something new comes. It's the same reason why, people, part of despair is same old shit, different day. Nothing's changing. I'm living the same old shit, the different day. Well, the reason is because you're either fighting it, fleeing it, numbing out to it, or trying to fix it. And none of that works. Okay. One day, and this is a poem in Becoming Visible, the previous book I wrote. One day, Pam just sat down and she just said, no to the way we were living our marriage. No to the fact that we're just duct taping it together. We're keep putting band-aids on place. And she just sat down and said no. And that was a blessed day, but it was a terrible day for me and for her too. It was just fell apart. We had to let it fall apart. And then there was much emptiness after that, like months. And then the new came out of it, something new. And it was not, like, I'm not kidding you. I mean, I'm not sugarcoating it. It was an awful time. It happened to me twice. The second time worse than the first. Happened to both of us. But we went through it somehow. And then you get something, a new order, a new marriage in that case. Otherwise, you will have that feeling of same old, same old, same old, because you're basically, the problem is at the disorder things, because this is the nature of the cosmos. You have stars, and then stars will they'll implode and they'll become dark holes. And then they pull stuff in and it gets so dense and so rich that it explodes, and then there's a supernova, there's a new star. And so that cycle, that's how the universe is creating itself. It's the same cycle. This is a cosmic cycle. It's the way, and we are part of the universe, but we're trying to do it by a different map, you see. But so this is a universal kind of disorder, emptiness, boom, supernova, and then that becomes the new order, and then disorder, fall apart, emptiness, something new comes, goes around. This is the map that we're meant to use. So have an accurate map. No, and I'll just have to close up now because we're running out of time. But so the first thing, if you're going to work with despair, is to have another map that's more accurate. And I contend this is the most accurate map, not just for the universe, but for us, and going through it. Now, the second thing that I would say about besides an accurate map, is to have a meditation practice. It teaches you how to go through things. It is what Suzuki, my first meditation teacher, said. He said, you're not a Zen student until you've done hard sitting. Hard sitting is, when things fall apart, can you just sit with it? You learn to do that. And if you can, sitting is a way to go deeper and a way to eventually abide and embrace whatever's happening. If I knew another way to do it, a better way or more, easier way, I would tell you. I'd do it myself, but that's what you do. You go deeper. And then you can reach the heart, which is the third thing. You're lost, all right? Things are falling apart, you're lost. Well, the heart acts as a compass. The heart is directional. That's why a compass is in 360 degrees, you see. The heart has a sense of seeing the new direction, but you've got to go deep to get into it, and that's where meditation comes in. So that's the third thing. And then if you can open your heart and follow that heart through the disorder, through the emptiness to the new life, then you're in business. See, and that takes courage. So the new map, meditation practice, reaching the heart, and then opening the heart. That's what courage really means. Courage from the French means open heart. You can't expect a life without pain anyway. But if you're going to open your heart, the pain, you have to have some stability to take that pain. But that leads to a new life. Vita nuova, as he calls it. And then, you're back. And it goes around. As he says, I've lived my life in widening circles. Yeah, there's not the same circle. the third time around, our marriage is not the same marriage. I mean, this is just my own experience. Uh, it's a much wider marriage, much happier marriage than the previous two circles. Yeah, yeah. Now, uh, just a last a last note here, if I can get it up. Uh, what is the question of despair? This is good to just get down. What despair is asking you to do is to go deeper. That's it. I mean, our culture is our what our culture says is go faster, you know. And to do that, you have to stay on the surface of things, you see. So that's one of the problems in our culture. It's devoid of really soul or spirituality. People don't, if you talk soul, people think you're, some kind of weirdo or something. But even it's devoid of any kind of interest in the spirituality and the transpersonal realm. And it's superficial. And so what despair asks of you, if you want to know how to get out of this state, it's you have to go deeper. You have to have a way to go deeper. And that's where meditation comes in. Uh, there are other ways, the Sufis whirl. I mean, there are other ways other than the sitting meditation that we're doing. And the Sufis whirl. But you gotta find a way to go deeper than our culture, because our culture is bereft of soul, it's just superficial. It's got a lot of stuff in it. You go onto cable, there's a million shows you could watch. How deep are any of them? How much soul is in any of them? We watch British spy things all the time. And they're interesting up here, but not a lot of soul to them. We know that, or I know it anyway. And they're enjoyable, but it's just a little recreational stuff. But if you don't have something of depth, all you have is what's on Netflix. Most of it's not too deep. So I think the question despair is asking. It's a kind of, can you go deeper? If you can, you get out of this, and that's going through this cycle. All right. Well, I think that's good enough for today. We'll take 15 minutes, and then at a quarter after the hour, we'll meet and literally take it deeper. We'll be able to reflect on what's going on for a couple of sittings. So I'll see you in 15 minutes.